Today's podcast is brought to you by Progresso Talent Partners, who for more than 25 years have successfully delivered interim and permanent leadership talent to transform businesses. To hire the talent you need to enable your business to thrive, visit www.progressotalent.com today. Welcome, listeners, to another episode of Extrology, the podcast where we delve into the extraordinary stories of remarkable individuals who defy the odds and redefine what's possible. I'm your host, Lee Cooper, and today we have an awe-inspiring guest who exemplifies resilience and transformation. Nick Klingensmith's journey is nothing short of extraordinary. A 4-time cancer survivor, type 1 diabetic, and recovering alcoholic, Nick turned his life around in a remarkable way. Battling herniated discs, nerve damage and sleep apnea, he found a new lease of life through obstacle course racing. Refusing to let his limitations define him, Nick has conquered over 100 Spartan races, 6 major marathons, several ultra marathons and numerous other endurance events, all of which have been utterly brutal. His story is a testament to the power of determination and the human spirit. As a sales professional turned motivational powerhouse, Nick now dedicates his life to inspiring others to overcome fear and self-doubt, pushing them towards achieving their dreams. With real honesty, raw honesty and passion, he shares his journey from the depths of despair to the pinnacle of personal triumph. So what's the story behind the story? Without further ado, let's get into it. Nick Klingensmith, welcome to Extrology. Great to have you here as my guest today, joining us from I want to say sunny Florida, because I imagine in my head sunny Florida is a perpetual kind of vision and existence for you. But yeah, welcome from Florida and great to have you on Extrology.
Lee, thanks for having me. And you know what? It is sunny down here just about every day. And even in winter, as opposed to Massachusetts, where I'm from originally, and everything just turns instantly like depressing gray, it is sunny down here all the time.
Fabulous. Well, it certainly comes across in your disposition, and that positivity and how that served you is something we're going to really spend some time in uncovering today. But I guess you mentioned there Massachusetts, great place to start. I wonder if, for context for listeners, you could perhaps start by telling us about your childhood. What was it like growing up, and how did your family perhaps shape who you are today?
Good question. I'm originally born and raised on the island of Martha's Vineyard in Massachusetts. And I grew up like most islanders did, very blue collar. We were the workers. My dad did construction. He was a cop. He was a private investigator, did hotel security. I was the muffin man. I made pizza boxes, served coffee, served the muffins, all to the uber wealthy who came down for the summer. My parents split when I was young, so I didn't have a very big structured family life. I ended up living with my dad for most of my childhood, or I guess more like my teen years. I wanted to get off the island. I was very ambitious. I didn't think I was going to be able to get the education or opportunity where I was. And home life wasn't great. I needed something different. So I sought a different avenue, and I found a boarding school, a private school in New Jersey, where I was able to get enough financial aid to attend, a place called the Petty School. And I went there for 4 years. And after that, I wanted to come back home. So I went to UMass for college, UMass Amherst. And I really enjoyed my education. And I had to pay my own way through school. I was working in restaurants the entire time. I just paid off my state school education like 2 years ago. And
Wow.
But I loved college. It's just that after that is when I began my sales career.
And you mentioned there, I guess, the motivation to get off the island. We badge it as such. Where do you think that stemmed from? What was it that was, who or what was inspiring you that there was a bigger world out there that you wanted to pursue?
Yeah, you can understand. I love the island. I never took for granted growing up there. I miss it every day. There's just nothing for me to do there. And I mean, like, there's no way for me to, well, technically I can work from anywhere now, but now I can't afford to live there. So beyond that, I didn't want to work in restaurants for the rest of my life, and I can't bang nails. So there really wasn't much of a future there for me. And I was ambitious. I wanted to work for the FBI. I wanted to go to law school. I wasn't going to find the opportunities doing the things that I wanted to do while I was there. I just didn't think the education and the opportunities were going to be enough. I wasn't running away from something. I had this inert knowledge that there was something more for me. And, maybe it was growing up as a child of neglect. Maybe it was learning that you're alone pretty early on in. Or maybe I was just born with a gift of resourcefulness, but I got this idea in my head of things I wanted to do. And so that I went and learned how to do it. When I decided I wanted to go to a private school for high school, I went to the library and found out and looked up private schools and found out where do I do, now it's Google. But back then I had to actually go to the library, find out where these places were, write letters and ask questions and correspond and figure all this out on my own because my dad didn't stand in my way. He definitely helped in my endeavors, but he didn't lead any of the administrative stuff like a lot of parents do these days.
One of the things that strikes me is your comment around education, and perhaps this is projection in some ways. Maybe I'm reflecting on my own education, but to have, respectfully, but at a relatively young age, really truly understood the importance of education to the extent whereby you're taking massive action to change your trajectory, to change your direction. That's quite, it's not unique, but it's quite unusual, it strikes me. I think oftentimes as we reflect as adults, we think, oh, if only I'd gotten more out of the education that I'd had, or, if only I'd maximized opportunities at a younger age. Some people might have that reflective nature. Maybe that's just me, but it does strike me that to have the foresight to understand the value of the education or the value and impact that education could have on your trajectory at a relatively young age is quite an unusual thing.
Well, at least back then it's kind of what was just preached to us, right? You go to school, you work hard, you get into a better school, you work hard, you get a better job, you do this. And here's the other thing though, we tend to lean into what we're good at. I was good at school. I was smart. We're talking like junior high, right? I was one of the smart kids. Some things just came more naturally to me. And so of course I leaned into it, but also I liked spending my time reading. I liked spending my time learning and trying to tackle complex issues. I just wanted more. And I'm not Good Will Hunting smart. All right. By the time I went to that boarding school, I was chasing average and it was hard. And here's the interesting thing though. I do look back at my education, especially the boarding school, and I think, man, if only I had worked harder. Because I didn't do that well in school and comparatively, but I have zero regrets because by the time I went to college, half the kids there were they didn't know how to do their own laundry. They were calling their parents every 6 hours. They didn't know how to be away from home, set their own schedules to things. Me, you know what I did on my second day of college? I went and got a job. So I was prepared, and that's what preparatory school was supposed to do. I was better prepared than other people were for me to acclimate. And the thing is too, I grew up a lot in those first 4 years of high school, more than I think I would have if I had stayed home where I was. Plus, I got so much exposure to other people. This school was wildly diverse. There was a lot of foreign students too. I wasn't the only kid on financial aid. And then of course, there was a lot of wealthy families there too. So you just got a lot of different exposure to some different people, I think, than maybe I wasn't getting before too. And I think that helped me just in terms of, because there's all sorts of education, right? The education comes from a lot more forms than just the book.
Do you think this perhaps might be a bit of a lazy assumption, but I'm intrigued that having grown up where you did, where to your point, there are those who success is, how we define success is an interesting subject that we won't go into that debate here, but I guess financial success, in order that you might have property on Martha's Vineyard, that your vacations are on Martha's Vineyard, to your point, you couldn't afford to live there now.
I can't even afford to go visit there now.
Yeah, it's an expensive place, right? So how much of that do you think that even subconsciously was influencing your desire, your ambition, it was fueling that fire, that sense of something else, if you like, that sense of something beyond?
Oh, that's 100%. This place I worked at for so long, all right, it was called Mrs. Miller's Muffins, and it was about the size of my office in here that you can't tell, but it's not very big. And they pumped out some business, but it was right there in the water in downtown Edgartown, right across the street from the yacht club. All right. So I was a competitive beach volleyball player, even as a teenager, and that was my favorite thing in the world. I lived for it. Okay. I would sacrifice social life so I could go home early, wake up to the sun the next morning, get out to the beach. It was my favorite thing ever. Because of that, I went to work stupid early so I could try to get out early enough to get out to the beach and go play volleyball. So I'd be going to work at like 5 a.m, which back then was really stupid early, especially for like a 15 or 16 or 17-year-old. I don't think I was allowed to work that early. The owner would sometimes not be there yet, but there would be a line of cab drivers and fishermen and stuff trying to get in to get their muffins and coffee. So I'd shimmy the window open, break in, and go open the place. So at first, the first like hour of the rush they were the other blue collar people in the Islanders. So it was like you love seeing people like you because you only have about 10 weeks to make all your money before the season ends. And so you also only have 10 weeks to get your whole social life in. You know, you're 10 weeks to do this. I mean, that place is a ghost town after that. So you're grinding through the first hour and you're sort of like, you're feeling good as this like working class, whatever. And then you've got the tourist rush. And I don't really get envious of them because good for them. You know, I can't wait to get out to the beach in a couple hours later, right? I compare myself to Frank Capra, the director, where I said I had an inherent distrust of wealth because I did get to see an ugly side of a lot of really rich people. I never understood how this dude out there with his Range Rover and his family with like matching $1 billion outfits who are staying at like a $5,000 a night place for 3 weeks down here can possibly be in such a shitty mood all the time. I never understood that.
Yeah,
and
it's interesting.
So I got to see some of the downside of it. So the thing is, I didn't envy it because I didn't have anything, but I didn't want anything. I felt I could do more. But this is a really long-winded story of telling you, though. After the rush, I would look out over the parking lot, across the water, and I would see the uber wealthy, like the $1 billion mansions that are right up on the cliffs, right up along the Eggertown Harbor. And one in particular, which I actually knew the guy who lived there, and had these like yellow shutters, so it kind of stuck out to me. And yeah, I would look out there and I would sort of like, you know, here I am working covered in muffin grease and coffee and getting like attitudes from rich douchebags. And I'm like, someday I will. And it wasn't about the money, though. It was about the feeling. So, yeah, no, there was definitely something there that was driving me and just knew that I was capable of more. I was drawn to do more.
And you certainly have. I mean, if I look at, I think your journey is nothing short of extraordinary. And I'd like, if I can, to, now that listeners have a bit of context, a bit of shape as to your background, but that I think you've overcome some extraordinary hurdles, it's fair to say, Nick, and it's a real privilege to be able to hear you share your story here this afternoon. But I think, or this morning in your case, but 4-time cancer survivor, type 1 diabetic, recovering alcoholic. I mean, you've overcome some enormous obstacles. And I wonder if I may, if you're happy to, I want to just start with perhaps with alcoholism. And was there a point that you realized that alcohol was becoming a problem in your life? And if so, what was that?
I knew alcohol was a problem in my life before I took the first drink. There was never a doubt in my mind that I would end up where I ended up. I always ever knew him in recovery. I never saw him drink. My mom was in and out of addiction and not a big part of my life after a while. But, my first time drinking, I wasn't like the other kids. I could drink more. I could function more. I was different. And I knew it. And the thing is, it made me feel not different, though. And it might have been the first time it made me feel like I fit in. And that was something I didn't quite realize. As we talk about the whole parents leaving, divorce thing, moving around the island, I never really understood until now that, when my dad left, he left me with a woman who was incapable of loving or caring for me. And even at 6 years old, you kind of know what that feels like. And so after about a year, she gave me up to live with him. And we moved in with his fiance and her 2 daughters, who threw us out the next morning. So I got thrown out of 2 houses by 2 different moms at like 7 years old in one day. I didn't even think about that until last year. I'm 45 now. But that's been there. And so apparently there's always been this feeling of not being wanted and, a feeling of not being good enough and perhaps a fear of not fitting in. And all that shit went away with alcohol because either I fit in or I didn't care what you thought. And that was my friend. And it it definitely took away those governors, and it was a superpower for a very long time because I could drink. I could drink a lot. I could drink a lot and function, and that definitely, like, I like to party because I think part of the reason is because I could go on these crazy adventures that were alcohol induced because we could drink a lot. But the thing is about alcohol as a disease is it is a liar, and it lies to you, and it lies to non-alcoholics too. It's just that it lies to the alcoholic more because it tells us that we aren't sick, and it tells us that there's nothing wrong. And so I didn't go to jail. I didn't go to hospitals. I wasn't getting DUIs. I wasn't getting in fights. I was showing up for work every day, meeting my responsibilities. And so it was so easy for me to lie and so easy for me to hide.
Lie to yourself?
Yeah. Well, I mean, to be honest, I could lie to others too, just through my actions. I didn't have to lie to them with my words. Like you read little things. And this is back to when Twitter was at least more prevalent in my life, I guess. And I remember I'd see things on Twitter like, keep hand sanitizer on your desk and drink vodka, because that way if they smell it, they'll think it's a hand sanitizer. And like I'd see stuff like that, but then I would also see stuff like, on the days you're really hungover, wear your best suit. And all those things, like those little subtle things that you might kind of just see randomly in your life, anything from an alcohol commercial to just, somebody giving probably tips for bad behavior. I did. And I overcompensated in other ways because the fact is, again, I was one of the smart kids again, and I was good at my job, and I could do it half there and impaired and distracted and selfish. And so technically to me, that all was a lie because I was living a lie. I was perpetuating this other lie, and I wasn't comfortable with myself, because why do I live the life that I live right now? I didn't really just wake up and say I wanted to be fit and active. I always wanted to be fit and active. There was just the other decisions that were standing in my way, and I was what was standing in my way. So ultimately, the thing is about this is that the superpower turns to a kryptonite and it doesn't tell you, because sooner or later, your bad decisions outnumber the good decisions. The bad nights outnumber the good nights. You don't realize that how much all of your decisions are based around alcohol. I wouldn't go anywhere unless I knew how I was going to get drunk and how I could get home. I love Halloween Horror Nights. It's a Universal Studios Orlando Halloween thing. It's like 2 hours, hour and a half down the road. I'm a geek for roller coasters, a geek for Halloween. I didn't go there for 10 years because it never occurred to me that I could go there and just not get drunk. I was like, I don't want to spend the money to get a hotel, and I don't want to have to drive all the way back drunk and blah, blah, blah. It never occurred to me, just go and enjoy yourself, that you don't have to go somewhere and get drunk and not get drunk. So yeah, the alcohol will sneak up on you, and it will take you if you allow it. And that's why I think I'm one of the most luckiest drunks there are. And I mean that because I had my dad as a role model for, 40 years. And also my last drunk was extraordinarily public. There was nowhere for me to hide. Everybody that I worked with knew that I had quit drinking. And then everybody that I worked with knew that I was not speaking on stage at the conference that I was supposed to be at in Vegas because I had gotten thrown out of the hotel the day before.
I was going to ask, actually, was there a particularly kind of low moment that made you realize you needed to make the change? Was that the moment, that kind of the intervention that it needed to happen?
100%. It was that night. It was that night when I came to on the floor of the Aria Hotel in Las Vegas, surrounded by cops and security, being told that I had to leave because I'd been in a fight. I don't even remember. And I'm not a violent guy. Even I was life of the party drunk, but here's the part I do remember. Earlier that night, I tried to fuck a hooker in a closet only a few doors down the hall where my girlfriend was sleeping, and she stole my money. And so we got thrown out of that hotel. I had to wake my girlfriend up because she got thrown out too. I had to tell her some bullshit about, oh, it's all bullshit. This didn't happen, blah, blah, blah. I'll explain this later. I don't even know how. She was probably just half asleep. We had to find a new hotel, and that took hours. And despite what you see in the movies, like, you can't just be a drunken idiot anywhere in Vegas. Anytime I try to sit down somewhere, they're like, can't sit here, can't do that. I'm like, I'm so tired. And we finally got a room. And when my head hit the pillow, I had this moment of lucidity, and I said this out loud, and I said, I don't want to live this way anymore. And that was it. because that wasn't a decision about alcohol. It wasn't to quit drinking. It was, I don't want to live this way anymore with lies and hookers and cheating and alcohol and having to, and forgetting things and cops. And I don't know who I am right now. Like, who am I? I spent the next 24 hours trying to decide whether I wanted to live or die. I spent that whole day in that room. My girlfriend had to go to the conference and hide her shame. And she did a phenomenal job. Good for her. The next morning I flew home, and that's a rough flight from Vegas, even after a good trip. so that was tough. And I had to make some decisions, and I really had to think about it. And when I landed, I called my dad and I said, hey, tomorrow I'm going to go start a program of sobriety. I'm going to pick up my white chip. And I was almost expecting admonishment. I don't know why. And he goes, oh, thank God, I've been waiting for you. And then I started the next day, and God willing, in 3.5 weeks, it'll be 10 years.
Well, congratulations, and good for you. I mean, I think I'm intrigued actually, as I don't know if there's any research into it, but the whole, are addicts born or made? I don't know. What I mean by that is that having come from a background where that was prevalent from a family perspective, as I say, I don't know the research. Perhaps this is something I should have looked into. But whether or not there's any evidence to support that view that actually, if you are you more predisposed, given your family situation, to go down that path? Is that quite a common occurrence?
I can't speak to any research either, but I can tell you that there's not going to ever be just one thing. But I think what you just talked about is something, an important consideration, right? Predisposed. Predisposed doesn't mean you have the thing, because there still has to be the manifestation of it, right? Like, I didn't drink because I'm an addict. I drank because of my personality defects. I drank because I didn't feel comfortable with who I was and how that manifested and how my actions and behaviors. So I drank to numb that. Alcohol was the symptom of my problem. To be honest, breaking the addiction to alcohol was the easiest thing I ever did. Putting down the drink was the easy part. And so it's like I wasn't really addicted to a substance. I was addicted to what the substance does for me.
Understood.
So, there's a couple things, right? There's whether it's predisposed, there are definitely going to be environmental and situational and circumstantial factors, right? That can lead to somebody's physical or mental addiction or obsession. But we still have free will. And free will I don't think free will helps us very much once we're addicted, but while we're still exercising it, we can still make good decisions despite what we may or may not predispose to, but then things sneak up on you. I mean, at one point, like, think of the things that we romanticize. Look at any alcohol commercial, look at a Corona commercial. Who doesn't want to be that person? Who doesn't want to be sitting on the beach right now with their spouse, just kicking back a Corona, being like, you see that all the time. You see it everywhere. And so, I mean, even now, sometimes I'm like, when I daydream about this relaxing moment, I'm like, oh, no, there's no alcohol in my hand. Like, it just becomes, I don't know, part of a thing. Like, I think so much in society that you hear so much justification for alcohol that, I don't know, maybe a lot of us have convinced ourselves that there's a positive reason to have it. And I don't have a problem with booze, like, for people. Like, I don't have any problem with how anyone else does anything. My wife drinks, not often, but I can be around it, right? But let's not confuse ourselves. There's only one reason we drink it, and it is to make us feel good. And that's fine. If you can have a responsible beverage or two, that's great. But I think we also lie to ourselves too, like, because when it comes down to it, yeah, if you have 5 beverages, you're drinking for effect, you're drinking for excess. Like, bad decisions get made after that. And again, I'm not judging. I'm just saying that there is a hard line, right? We think there's a soft line, but there's not. There's a hard line. And it's what we do in that soft line that over time can create a pattern or a habit or things that will lead to when the addiction takes over.
And alcoholism is not, it's not the only problem you've had to overcome. I think when I reflect on your story, and we'll go into more depth here, but when I reflected back on your story, I'm thinking, in isolation, alcoholism on its own is a tough, that's a very, very, very demanding challenge to overcome that many don't make it. But, there's kind of, I know we're not tick boxing here, but there's one, right? So let's look at 2 and 3. I mean, first and foremost, diabetes. When did you find out first you were diabetic, and how did that diagnosis, do you think, change your life?
I can't put any one of these into a silo. Cancer contributed to alcoholism. Diabetes considered to alcoholism. And I'm going to skip ahead for just a moment because, you mentioned about overcoming all these things. I didn't overcome any of them. I only overcame one thing and one thing only, and that was my mind. Because when I got cancer, the first time, I began to create a victim mindset around myself because it was cancer versus me. When I got diabetes, I was 27. I was like 208 pounds. I had shoulder surgery a couple months before, which is why I was so out of shape because I didn't do anything after that from a volleyball injury. I got nerve damage from that shoulder surgery. I couldn't bend my thumb or pronate my hand for like 11 months. And it's still weak. I still can't turn it all the way around and I still don't have like full whatever. But then I started losing weight. Oh, and I got fitted for a CPAP mask for sleep apnea at the exact same time I'm wearing my arm in a sling recovering from surgery. So there was a lot of things that were starting to just make me feel like a broken lemon, and here I am like 27 years old. I'm trying to get married later that year. My career is still going all right. I just moved to Florida a couple years ago. And then all of a sudden I'm thirsty all the time. Now, I drank like 4 gallons of water a day for years. So for me to be thirsty just meant I wasn't drinking enough water. No problem. But I started losing weight all the time, like crazy. But I'm like, hey, you know what? I just started physical therapy for my shoulder, probably kickstarting my metabolism. I'm getting back in the gym. It makes perfect sense, right? So I switched my sales territory. So I'm not eating those Cuban sandwiches every day anymore over there. I'm drinking sugar-free Monster. It makes perfect sense. I'm like, oh man, but I got to get up and pee like every 20 minutes all night. Oh, but I'm drinking all this water. Oh, I'm tired all the time. Oh, but I'm getting up and peeing every 20 minutes. Everything had a reason. So my ex-wife, that's who I was with at the time, her dad was a type 1 diabetic. And so she sort of knew what was happening already. But she's like, you need to go to the doctor. You need to go to the doctor. I'm like, nah, it's fine. Meanwhile, I am living my best life. All right. I'm eating ice cream every day. I am having protein shakes in the afternoon. I'm just eating whatever I want, whenever I want. And I'm losing weight. I lost weight over Thanksgiving. I mean, it was magnificent. But then all of a sudden, I was 153 pounds by January. In November, I weighed 208. I looked like a little kid in his dad's clothes. My cheeks were all sucked in, and I'm like, all right, we'll go to the doctor. I didn't even have a primary care doctor back then. And I walked into this place, and sure enough, like they were like, he's this guy, they took blood tests or whatever. And I'm like, you think you know what it is already? He's like, oh, I know exactly what it is. Like, as soon as I said the symptoms, he's like, they took the urine test, but he's like, this isn't necessary. And so, yeah, I was diagnosed as type 1 diabetic. I was admitted to the ICU at the ER of the local hospital with a blood sugar level of over 800. And for those listening, 100 is a lot closer to the number you want to be.
So how has that impacted you in terms of daily challenges? How do you face living with type 1 diabetes, and how have you learned to manage it?
I would rephrase it and say it's how I learn to manage it, because
right.
Being in sobriety has helped me learn one very important thing, which is one day at a time living. And I have to manage diabetes the same way, because diabetes is a fickle bitch. Like alcoholism is a disease that tells you don't have it. Diabetes sometimes does the same thing too. It's very hypocritical. Right now, at this exact moment, my blood sugar is, okay, a little high. May go back down. We'll see. I have the same breakfast every single day. Most days, I'm very consistent in my activity, but I didn't run this morning. So I am nervous as hell to see how it's going to react.
Right.
Because I didn't adjust the dose. And because I'm consistent, I really shouldn't necessarily have to, but it's scary. I have to worry about what my blood sugars are like before I go leave the house. I have to check in with my blood sugars before I try to have sex with my wife. I have to check in now. I have to have a bottle of power, like a sugar water, basically within reach at all times, especially when I'm considering being on camera. Imagine being in sales or doing job interviews. It is 100% intertwined with every aspect of your life. You cannot forget you have it. That said, back to the mindset, all of that for years, I convinced myself I couldn't run. I couldn't do this. I couldn't do that because of diabetes. What I finally was able to do is accept the fact that I have diabetes and stop resisting the fact that I have a different starting line than some of the other people. And I have to go through all the bullshit, but it's not a punishment and I'm not a victim. It's just a cost of doing business. And so long as I accept that those are the things that I have to do, or better yet, those are things that I get to do in order to do the things that I want to do, that's how I overcome that, is with the mindset of just knowing that this is my life. Because for a long time, I just resisted that concept of it. Like, I wish this would go away. But that just makes it worse and worse and worse. And finally, it's like, all right. Plus, with technological advancements, and I will tell you what, social media is a diabetic's best friend. Because I knew so much less about diabetes until Instagram a year ago. You know who gives me the least amount of information on diabetes? Doctors. People who shit on social media need to take a hard look at themselves because you choose your feed. My Instagram feed is diabetes information and education, positive vibes and dogs, obstacle course racing, motivational speakers, things that that is nothing but sunshine and warm heart for me. But the diabetes education, not just from educators, but people like me, amateur athletes, like professionals, like people who live active lives, and seeing how they're doing it and what they're doing. Also, knowing that I'm not the only one who struggles. That was huge because sometimes the diabetes gets the best of you. I talk about mindset, right? I am not in control and at my best self all the time. Nobody is. There are times where I put fists through walls and I smash things because it is just getting the better of me. And to feel that you're the only one who's like that, that's a dark place. That's a very dark place. And so to discover that diabetic rage is a term, and I'm not the only one who's felt that way, and that other people have struggled with it, and that how they learn to recognize the triggers before it onsets and just different things like that. And I'm like, first, to just I can't tell you the exhale to know you're not alone.
And I guess therefore that similarly, if we look at, we've talked about alcoholism, that sense that you're not alone, that the strength of the support network through recovery. I'd imagine there's some similarities there with, you're part of a community around diabetes, that there's that support network again around. I'd imagine similarly with cancer. I wanted to talk about your cancer diagnosis. Can you take us back to the first time that you were diagnosed with cancer, and what went through your mind when you first heard the news?
It's funny how you just mentioned it's probably the same with cancer. For me, it's not at all. I know nothing about cancer. I study nothing. I look at nothing. I'm interested in nothing. I have a different approach with cancer. And it's funny you ask about what was going through my mind the first time, because out of my 4 cancer diagnoses and the 19 years of dealing with cancer and the 10 years of having a tumor in my throat that's still there, there's only probably 5 minutes of that I can truly relate to every other cancer patient that ever was. And that is the first 5 minutes, because I do know how alone it feels to hear those words. You have cancer, for the first time. It was dumb luck that we found it. I had moved into a new apartment. It was winter. It was very dry air, old heating system. This is just telling you the background. I was waking up with a dark substance on the back of my tongue in the mornings and didn't know what it was. Turns out it was dried blood. We were looking everywhere. If I had a hole, we searched it. And turns out that as I go to see the endocrinologist, the ears, nose, and throat guy, he's feeling around my neck, and then all of a sudden he pauses. I knew nothing about cancer. I'd never even heard of thyroid cancer before, and I knew right there, in that moment, that I had it. Don't know why. So he orders a biopsy, which was the most miserable shit I've ever been through. They told you it wasn't going to be bad. They were wrong. It was, I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Casino. with Joe Pesci.
Yes.
But it was kind of like that scene where he's stabbing that dude in the neck with a pen. Like, yeah, that is it. It's awful. And I've had to have that shit done 3 times. And by the way, by 3 times, it was more like 5, because at least on 2 of those times, they're like, oh, we need more cells. I'm like, no, it's going back for more. So that's brutal. But after, so I'm standing in Foxwoods Casino. I was there in Connecticut. I was there for a sales conference. And that's when I got the phone call. The worst thing was actually at 4:55 the night before. I saw the number, but we were in a session and I missed the call. And when I called back, they were gone for the day. And so I had that whole night. Everyone's down at the BB King Lounge, everybody from the company, it's a conference. They're all partying, right? I had like a beer and I'm just like, just made an appearance. I didn't want to talk to anybody. I went to the poker room and I was there all night. Like that's where I tried to just get my mind off of things. And so when I finally saw the call, it was right during like the CEO's keynote. And I'm like, nope, just walked down the hallway and heard those words, "You have cancer," for the first time. And
they told you over the phone?
Yeah, thank God. That was a Friday, dude. If I had to wait till Monday, I would have just fucking killed myself. There's no way.
But even so, to be told something of that magnitude on a phone call, that's I guess there is no way to soft soap that message, right? The message is the message.
Well, plus you got to understand something too. With cancer, there's a time factor.
Yeah, okay.
That we already missed one day by the phone call. You know what I'm saying? By missing it the day before. And now, given it was thyroid, it's not that aggressive. But what if it wasn't? Days matter sometimes with these things. And but and I'm sure I could have been like, great, I'll come in and find out. But that's not who I am. No, you tell me right now. You can text me the answer if you have to, but I need to know. Like, give me an enemy I can face. It is the unknown is the hard part to deal with, especially with something. The unknown is always what we're dealing with, right? And we don't know what's going to happen 5 minutes from now. And it's foolish to think that we do. But it's when it gets the big unknowns that really kind of ruin us. And I'm good at this one day at a time living, but I mean, it's different than thinking, hey, I might get hit by a car today because we could die today. Then is this thing going to kill me in the next year? Am I going to be alive for the wedding I'm planning? Am I going to be alive for the honeymoon I'm planning? Am I going to be going through some sort of crazy treatment? Am I going to be able to work? Like, what is going to happen now? How is my life going to be dramatically and catastrophically affected? Those are I wasn't worried about dying at all. It was more like, what is it all going to have to go through? So I didn't want to tell anybody about it because I was scared, right? Like, and I didn't realize it. I wasn't willing to admit it to myself either. Hearing those words was very hard, but the hardest thing that was when I had to say it, because my boss, who knew, he was the only person I had told even what was going on, because he was my boss, and if I was going to be missing for doctor's appointment, somebody had to know. And so he came out into the hallway, and that's when I had to like say the words, "I have cancer." And I damn near broke down just trying to say it. Like I was just, I don't know how long it took me to say all 3 words. It was so hard. And that was the hard part. And so I went to the poker room immediately because I was like, I'm just going to play cards. I don't want to think about this shit. Now, I was a pretty good card player back in the day, and I could usually sit at a table for a very long time. I got cleaned out in like 45 minutes. Like, I got every bad beat that could happen. Usually I don't even get enough cards to play that much in 45 minutes. I'll sit there for hours just waiting for my hand. No, I got boom, 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 done. I was like, okay, I guess I have to go home now. And I went home that night into that same apartment. By the way, the source of the blood, we never found it. I'm guessing, because there's only one place we didn't look, my gums. Dry air, open mouth, sleep apnea, didn't have the CPAP yet. I'm guessing it was just irritating my gums and that was causing the blood. Also, since I don't believe in coincidence, could just be the hand of God telling me that I had some stuff to go look at. But when I got home that night, I distinctly remember this scene. I'm standing in my bathroom and there was kind of like this blue hue, like in the background, like kind of like the lighting from the movie Flatliners. And that's when I was staring in the mirror and I was looking back at myself. And that's when I didn't like what I saw, because staring back at me was like this whimpering, scared little kid, and, red puffy cheeks, like tearing eyes. And I didn't like what I saw. And it took me a minute to really muster up the words that I wanted to say. And when I did, I looked back at myself. And I don't know how long I stared. I mean, I might have been in there for a while. I might have been in there for a minute, but it felt like a while because this whole situation was just surreal. It was dead silence. I heard about this shit in a casino. All right. And then I had an hour and a half drive. And now I'm standing alone in a small, dark room. First time this thing's all hitting me. And that's when I looked and I said, fuck you. Now, I didn't just say it once. I said it again and louder and louder and louder. And I started yelling and I started beating my chest. My poor neighbors in this apartment building must have been so confused because I wasn't yelling at me. I was yelling at cancer. At that point, I was saying, fuck you, come and get me. You want me? Come and take me. Come and get this from me. Because it was me versus cancer and I was going to pick a fight because I did not want to feel like a victim. I did not want to feel like a patient. And that's how I took the fight to cancer. And I wish I could say that I kept that mindset the entire time, but I'm going to skip ahead for a second because the third time I got my diagnosis, the time that it was inoperable, that was right before my last drunk. So I was relieved to get cancer. I was relieved to have inoperable cancer because that way I could drink and nobody could mess with me. How far did I go from not wanting to feel like a victim and not wanting people feeling sorry for me to actually cultivating sympathy just in that 8-year period?
So what flipped? What was it that, to your point, you started from a position of this is not going to beat me, to get yourself to a place where, well, hey, I'm respectfully, but maybe I'm beaten. It is what it is. To then clearly, if you look at, we come on to all of the things you're doing now. What was the trigger? What was the moment where you went, no, the victim stuff, it's going to end. It ends now. I'm moving forward. I'm living my life.
When I ran my first obstacle course race, it was transformative. All right. I had literally built this bubble around myself of all these things I couldn't do. I'd built a life full of excuses and lies. And when I was out there in my first race, it was liberating. There was no excuses, no doubt, no fear.
Why did you pick the race? What was it about obstacle? When we say obstacle course racing, I think we need to elaborate a little on that turn of phrase because there is a risk, I think, that some may perhaps envisage obstacle course races as, we have in the UK here, we call it sports day, but you have a track and field day where at kindergarten, obstacle course races is you run through a hoop, jump a couple of, hurdles, whatever it might be. You're talking, there's a difference between, there's an obstacle course race and then there's obstacle course racing. These things are poles apart. So perhaps give us a bit of context, give us a description, and why'd you pick it?
So the sport of obstacle course racing actually started in the UK. It was a race that may not be around anymore, or at least got bought by somebody else, and it was called Tough Guy. And it was this old dude who looks like the guy on the Guinness commercial. It's his property. It's the coldest place that I think I've ever seen. And that's when his course is, people are getting hypothermia there, and it's just a complete mental toughness thing. And so a bunch of brands and companies in the US and across the globe have started these companies like Spartan Race, Tough Mudder, Savage Race, and creating brands for obstacle course racing. Now, my first race was a 10K distance. It was actually closer to 8 miles. So I don't know, I can't do the math, 12, 13K. It was a trail run. So it was all through the woods, mud. This was Florida, so there might have been a little swamp. And then there was about 30 obstacles. And the obstacles are everything from climbing over 8-foot walls, up 15-foot ropes, traversing overhead, hanging, swinging things, carrying 80-pound sandbags and 60-pound buckets, and climbing under barbed wire, throwing a spear. So those are what a lot of the obstacles actually involve.
And so where were you in the cancer cycle, if we can call it that, when you first decided, I'm going to do this, I'm taking on my first race?
So it was a Friday afternoon in 2016 when I was first introduced to Spartan. My boss walks in the office and he goes, "Nick, I want to do a Spartan race and you're going to do it with me." I looked at him and I'm like, no, no, fuck no. An 8 to 10 mile trail run? That seems awful. With obstacles? No way. I had no intention of being that uncomfortable. But see, that's when I went home that night. And that's when I discovered the problem. I had everything going for me. I was 2 years sober. I was a VP of sales with 100 people working for me. We were crushing goals. I was managing my health. I had great pets, great house. I was dating my wife. My now wife. And I had just decisively beaten cancer for the 4th time. Now, the 3rd tumor is still in my neck. It's been 10 years. It's still there. It's up against the vocal cords and some other bullshit, and they don't want to take it out. And fine, it's not doing anything. If I wasn't a speaker now, I would forget that it's there. I forget it. The 4th time was in the back of my head, and it was different because it was the scariest one I ever had, and it was the least problematic, I guess. I found it through dumb luck again. It was just a nodule in the back of my head, and it was like actually in a fatty pocket too. So speaking of bad biopsies, I had to go in like 3 times to find like the cancer cells. Whew, those things are not fun. But when the surgery came around, they actually just took it out of my head, but that was it.
Right.
No radiation, no chemo, no pills, no nothing. You understand, I've been dealing with cancer for almost 20 years, and I have never been given a win. Once you have cancer, it's always part of your life, always. And you see it everywhere. And so, in 2005, when I first got cancer, I wanted to know, how do I win? Just being alive today isn't how I win. Like, that's not a win for me. Like, how do I say, fuck you, cancer, I win? And they're like, it doesn't really work that way. Lance Armstrong said it really good in his book. He's like, it's like, I don't exactly have cancer anymore, but I don't not have it either. It's always part of your life. But so when I got that win, all of a sudden, a couple weeks later, I got asked to do a Spartan race, and I didn't realize it at the time that I just felt stuck. All of a sudden, I had nothing but blank space in front of me. For the first time in a very long time, I had no enemy to fight. Things were good. I didn't know what to do. I had achieved so much success monetarily, career-wise. Like, I had beaten all these other things. So I said yes to the challenge just because it was time for something new, something different. I didn't know what it was. I didn't sign up for 104 Spartan races. I signed up for one. I had no idea that when I came through the fire that day, how much I would want more, because I found out that all the limits I had imposed on myself were lies. And if that could not be true, what else could not be true? What else might I be capable of? And to answer the first question about the victim part, those next 6 months, I spent training for more races, both in mind, body, and spirit. I was meditating, stretching, doing more water, better food, right? I was improving in every area of my life. And then it hit me. The second car accident, where I got several more herniated discs, nerve damage. That same night, my cat of 12 years died. This is my best friend. 10 days later, the lady who hit me died. I was sitting at a red light, and she hit me from behind. Her car went flying through the air like boom, 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 boom. There's nothing in the world I could have done different besides just not be there that day. And but it weighed a lot on me. And all of a sudden, everything that I had gone through, everything that I had thought I overcome, everyone that I thought I was becoming, I liked the person I saw in the mirror, and it was being taken away from me. And I found myself right back on that couch, the same couch I was on, like when my boss had asked me to do a Spartan race, and I said no. Only this time I'm like, I just want to give up. But I didn't know what that meant. And so you keep moving forward, right? You keep going to work, you keep taking showers, you keep walking the dog. And eventually I put another race on the calendar, even though I had an undiagnosed nerve damage, all these discs, because you got to do something. And I was training for that race, and I was very flat. Like, I just wasn't in it. And I was listening to this motivational speaker on YouTube, and he was going back and forth about being a survivor or a victim. And I'm like, why do I want to be a survivor? What in the fuck is the value of that? That is not the point of life. The point of life is not to just hang on and survive for dear life. That's when I made a decision that I'm here to thrive, and that I was still playing the victim. Here I was still, after everything I'd been through. And I realized I hadn't overcome anything. I had only survived everything I had been through. And I was tired of living that way. And I said, you know what? Fuck it. I am not a victim. I'm a warrior, and I am going to war. I'm going to pick a fight with cancer. I'm going to pick a fight with diabetes. I'm going to spend every day helping other alcoholics get sober, because that's how I recover. And I said, I will not be defined by my adversity, but rather my triumph over it. And so it was that simple, of making a decision, a declaration. And that's how I overcame my adversity. And that's how I know I can overcome any adversity.
I have so many questions. It's incredibly inspiring and incredibly insightful. And I really appreciate you sharing this story with us. But I'm also very conscious of your time. So let's talk about how you're using that. It's incredible experiences, incredible journey on which you found yourself. You're constantly overcoming. How are you using that now? How are you using that fuel? Because you're doing some incredible things. I'm really intrigued. Yes, the physical stuff, over 100 Spartan races, 6 major marathons, several ultras, those things, absolutely. But you're also helping others tremendously. It strikes me with the work that you're doing. What are your hopes and dreams for where you are now and how you're moving forward in your life, both in terms of your personal goals and your mission to inspire others?
First it's important that you're right. The physical stuff is just a physical manifestation of how. It's my vehicle of how I'm overcoming myself and how I'm overcoming obstacles. And also the physical stuff teaches me discipline and commitment and helps me to be purpose-driven and extraordinarily intentional with my time. And it also helps me to build community and belonging. There's so many reasons that's important, but that's not the purpose of what I do, right? The purpose is to help others. And there was 2 other critical moments that happened throughout my story, because even the moment I just talked about, I didn't know the significance of it until I wrote my book. So when I wrote Through the Fire in 2019, my first year writing it, the first version was 125,000 word ego manifesto. It might as well have had Jake Gyllenhaal and The Rock on the cover. It was a cool look into endurance sports, but it wasn't what it is now. It wasn't an honest reflection of who I was. And that's what the second year, 2020, I spent revising, and I cut out 37,000 words. I cut out all the bullshit and all the lies I told myself. And I began to see my life in a different perspective. I identified and discovered a purpose to my life through journaling, through writing my book, which is to overcome every obstacle and inspire others that they can too. And so throughout that process, I began to see the patterns in the process, both a process of building resilience, a process of overcoming obstacles. And I just knew that I had a message to share. So learning and seeing that was step 1. That was part of the book. The second is when I published the book, because I put it out there for the person who might need to find the message. And it turns out a lot of people needed it. And a lot of people found it, because in the last couple of years, they would reach out to me and share their stories with me and thank me for mine and tell me how that mine resonated with theirs or help with them. And that's when I knew I had a calling to do something different. And so I've just been doing more of that until finally 7 months ago, I made the decision to leave my corporate job and pursue my role full time as a motivational speaker and coach.
And how do you think your experiences have shaped your vision for the future and the legacy that you want to leave?
This is going to sound overly simplistic. It's not my experiences, because if we just tried to use my experiences, the world would get a pretty dark and dismal place. It's my decision and my perspective, my chosen perspective. And it's very new, and it is a choice. And that's why I was going to say it sounds overly simplistic, but you see what you want to see. I wanted to see the bad. I wanted to feel special. I wanted people to feel sorry for me. I wanted to be a victim for so long until it doesn't work for you anymore. So that's not how I want to live. I want to be happy. You know what inspires me? Inspiring others. Helping others helps me. I mean, that's it. It's a simple thing. So the way it is that I share the power of our mind and our decision to move beyond the victimhood and to move beyond the experiences and the traumas. Now, that's not saying ignoring them. They are with me every single day, but that's why I still have to make that choice, because the past always tries to keep you in the past. So a lot of times, here's the thing, I'm not living in the past anymore, but what I am focused on is sharing my current perspective about how getting through, a terrible ordeal, or about how you can practically make that decision every day. It's not as simple as snapping your fingers. Like sometimes we have to really get into the nitty-gritty. And this is where I just go back to day-at-a-time living. I make that decision every single day. We all wake up with the same problem every single day. Everybody wakes up with the exact same problem, which is any thought that we have is going to be based on the past. The first thoughts we have are going to be carrying from the day before, which is no longer relevant. So there's a decision. At what point are we going to start thinking about today and the future and the things that we want, the things that we need, and to do it without limits, to do it without constraints, to do it without holding ourselves back because of some preconceived notion. If I still lived in the same past, I'd be knocking doors in Springfield, Massachusetts, making $40,000 a year selling phone service because I would have never thought I was capable of moving beyond that. Or maybe I would have never left the island. Maybe I'd be banging nails somewhere, like scraping by, like, because I'm not very good at it, or working in restaurants, like, and then winter comes and not having money for 9 months because I never thought I could move beyond it. Or maybe I'd be fucking dead because I keep trying to die. Like, we don't decide whether or not we're victimized. We do decide whether or not we remain a victim.
That's a really compelling point on which to leave listeners, Nick. And it's been a brilliant. This could go for hours. There's so much there, so much rich content.
We'll just have to book another one.
I'd love to, because there's just so much there. And I think it's not only the story, it's the way it's the learning that you extract from your experiences and the way you frame it that I think is really inspiring for people to understand. And I think, I love this sense with Extrology. I love this idea of the endless possibilities that can be afforded to all of us with the right mindset. It's not to say that's easy, but there is, with the right mindset, almost an endless sense of what we could achieve. And I think the way you frame and utilize your own experiences and your own mindset to really empower others and share your views and inspire others is brilliant. So yeah, let's do this again. I'd love to do this again, but let's get listeners to where they can find you. Where do we need to point them? Where do they need to go to find out more about Nick Klingensmith?
Jump on my website, www.stridemotivation.com, and book a call with me. I would love to learn more about you, your story, your struggle, and your goals.
It's brilliant. Nick, it's been a real pleasure. Thank you.
And I got one thought for you too, based on what you just said about the endless possibilities, because I get it. We have these central governors telling us to slow down, telling us things can't be done. And not for nothing, but all of our life experience limits our thinking. It doesn't contribute to, it doesn't open it, right? Like the world pushes back from the moment we're born. So here's what I would say. I would rather think big and be wrong than think small and be right.
I love that. That's brilliant. Thank you. Thank you. There've been so many nuggets here of genuine gold, but that's to leave us there on that cliffhanger, because as I say, I would like to revisit this. So maybe we can take that concept and just explore that a little bit further next time. But Nick, it's been a pleasure to share this story with you, your story with us, with listeners today, just to sit in myself. I've been spellbound as you've been talking. Brilliant stuff. And I really appreciate your time. And I wish you continued success as you go from strength to strength in inspiring others. You're a really inspiring guy, and you don't need my endorsement, but nonetheless, genuinely, you're a really inspiring guy. So thank you. I appreciate it.
We'll take it, though. I appreciate you.
Hi, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for listening to today's Extrology podcast. I really appreciate your audience and ears. If you've enjoyed it, then why not hop onto iTunes and give us a review? I'd really appreciate anything that you might have to say. Any feedback always gratefully received, and look forward to hosting you next time. See you soon. Just a reminder, today's podcast is brought to you by Progresso Talent Partners. Visit www.progressotalent.com today for more information.